Good afternoon and welcome to the latest installation of the Planet to Plate Festival hosted by the Institute for Sustainable Food at the University of Sheffield. And this afternoon we have a really exciting and playful artistic piece that is called Bittersweet Air. And it's I think, now for something completely different. There's never been a better phrase to describe what you're about to see this afternoon. The Institute for Sustainable Food has played a major role, I think, in helping to fund and promote science art, and not just your classic literal representation of science by art, but a true deep collaboration. And that's what you're about to see today. And I'm really delighted to be able to announce, to introduce to you my very good friend and renowned artist, Anthony Bennett, another close friend of mine, Professor Tim Daniel, and a very special guest who will be making an appearance later in the performance. So without wishing to be too cryptic, I should probably leave it there, and in a few seconds' time, you will be exposed to, I think, a real spectacle.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Duncan, for that introduction to this session. Before we start, we really need to think a little bit about what bittersweet air means. And what we're talking about today is really one of the unintended consequences of the Green Revolution that took place in the middle of the last century. First, I guess, we should talk about what the Green Revolution was. This was several advances that were made pretty much at the same time that enabled us to revolutionize food production. One of these was improved plant breeding, and another one was the Haber-Bosch process, which allowed us to produce very large amounts of synthetic nitrogen fertilizer. These two findings in particular came together to help us feed the world and prevent starvation, but they have had unintended consequences. One of these is that we've had huge human population growth. So the amounts are growing exponentially, and it is feared that we won't be able to control these going into the future. Another is that if you add large amounts of synthetic nitrogen fertilizer to soil, you feed the microorganisms that use that for their biology. And this means that only about 30 or 40% of all the nitrogen that we add to fields for plant growth is actually captured by the plant. And the rest of it is lost in various ways. Some of it, of course, we're probably quite familiar with nitrate leaching into watercourses and enriching rivers and changing the ecology of those systems. Quite a lot of the rest of it is released as a gas. Often, this is nitrogen gas, which is very common in the atmosphere and is completely inert. But a significant proportion of this is released as nitrous oxide. This is, of course, laughing gas that can be used at the dentist and can be used as a recreational drug and has the name sweet air. This is a problem, not only because it reduces the amount of nitrogen that's captured by the plant, but also, perhaps more importantly, because nitrous oxide is an extremely potent greenhouse gas, about 300 times more potent than carbon dioxide. It's the microorganisms that we've fed by fertilization that are responsible for the production of this gas. And it represents somewhere around 10 or 15% of all of the greenhouse gas emissions across the planet. The amount that would be released in a room of this size, if it was a field, is represented by the amount of balloons on this floor, which is a terrifying amount of nitrous oxide. So with that, I think we can start our session. I'd like to introduce you to grub. So grub is one of the 1.7 billion extra people that the planet will have sometime between now and 2040. and perhaps, let's say, in about 10 years' time. So Grob has some questions, I think. So let's see. Yeah. Yeah, I agree, Grub. It's an amazing number, isn't it? It doesn't sound possible. But basically what's happened, and I shall stand up for this, is that our human population growth has been flat. And then around the Green Revolution time, it started to go up, and it's gone up at an exponential level. The amount of food that we've produced to feed these people, unfortunately, hasn't grown at the same amount. So we're actually not producing enough food for the number of people we have. And the amount of nitrogen we use to generate that food is much steeper. So we have a problem. Yeah. Yeah, nitrogen's a tricky one. So about 80% of the atmosphere is nitrogen, but that's completely inert. Plants need nitrogen to grow, as most gardeners would know, but they can't use nitrogen as it is in the atmosphere. It has to be made reactive. It has to be made into ammonia or nitrate or something similar. So it's that nitrogen that we're worried about as that returns back to the atmosphere. And what's happened over the last few decades is that the amount of nitrogen that is made reactive nitrogen that's made naturally globally has been overtaken by our industrial production of nitrogen through the Haber-Bosch process. And it's that that's driving a lot of the problems with the planet's environment in terms of nitrogen. Yeah. Yeah, well, the cost is pretty high. So Haber-Bosch uses somewhere around 3% of the world's energy just to make nitrogen fertilizer for plants. But probably the bigger cost is environmental. So when it's lost as nitrous oxide, as I said before, there are massive problems because of the greenhouse gas effect. So if you think about 10 or 15% of the global greenhouse gas emissions come from agriculture, from nitrous oxide from agriculture, that's clearly something that we need to try and sort out. The problem is we're not really too sure how well we can do that. So some of those ways would be to reduce the amount of fertilizer we put on our fields. So that's pretty obvious. Of course, there are problems with that. I mean, globally, some places we over-fertilise and there's no cost to that. And obviously, other places where we fertilise not enough, then we start losing crop yield. But most places are on a balance economically. So if you start reducing too much fertiliser addition, you start losing plant material. But what I can do is I can give you a token. So reducing fertilisation is probably one of the biggest things that we can currently do to stop greenhouse gas emission from agriculture. There you go. Okay. Well, we can do a few other things. We can do things, but they cost money, so they're not free, like reducing over-fertilisation. So one of these, for example, is we can use chemical inhibitors. And that can also help us save a little bit of this greenhouse gas. So I can give you another coin for use of inhibitors. There you go, Grub. Yeah, well, I can try and get you another balloon if you like, Grub. So if we stop ploughing, we call it reduced tillage, then that also helps prevent some nitrous oxide release because of the way that the soil works. So I can give you perhaps a little bit of a smaller token for that one. Here, you can have this token for that. Sorry, Grub. We've run out of ways to get you really much in the way of savings. And in fact, if we added all of those ways that we currently know how to save nitrous oxide, then you can probably only save about 10% of the balloons that you got in front of you. So, I mean, that's represented by this really big token, right? So 10% of all of the emissions you can do, but nothing else. Oh, Grub, I think she's already given you all the nitrous oxide she can give you.
So is that it?
Yes, yeah.
That's all we've got to look forward to. It's like, well, it's what are we supposed to do? Like I say, I'm here in 2030, looking back over my last 10 years, and you guys have been researching here. There's all sorts of things going on, but yeah, surely we can make some inroad into this, and I think this character here is what. Anyway, so what? I saw this programme on the telly over the sort of years, and all this technology that they're using in sort of agriculture. When I was younger, we always imagined the farmer on his tractor, and that's not what it's been like, actually, for the last 10 years. Technology's again, on this programme that I watched, there were robots, and they were delivering, well, they were sort of checking the amount of fertiliser that a plant needs, and then they gave it to it. The robot did it. There was no jolly farmer. There's grown more and more of these sort of hydroponic farms. Again, when, that can deliver exact amount of nutrients, and it's still, people are getting hungry still. There's massive advances, and it's just not good enough. And then I saw another telly programme, and it made me mad, because it was about this thing called phosphates. I mean, you're nitrous oxide. I met you when my wife was having kids, and I shoved a mask on her face when she was screaming her head off, and she was cool with it. When I was really little, my brother had gas and air while he was having the tooth out at the dentist, and they took the wrong tooth out. But it's and then there's party people who have these ridiculous little laughing gas. So then, that's the most thing these days, what people associate with this gas. And it's mad. It's mad. We need to think about all these nutrient things in different ways. And, yeah, coming back to it, Professor Tim, what about phosphates? What about phosphates?
Yeah, I'm afraid phosphates is another big problem. Not a lot we can do about that, because if you run out of phosphates, then you've run out of phosphates. So I'm afraid I can't help you there, Grub.
Well, again, I'm not, you know, this is not good enough, is it? It's, I'm, you know, I could lose my rag with this. It's like, it's, I think we can do better than this. It's like, I know they dig up phosphates, and, but, let's get back to this nitrate problem, shall we? So let's... It's unbelievable. So, yeah. Anyway, I need a rest. I was, the other day, I was driving through Mayfair in a van, and I was delivering to this posh gallery, some biodegradable wine beakers. And the reason I was held up because there was a demonstration in Piccadilly. The demonstration was about waste and waste food. And I was sort of sat there, engine ticking over, and these people were worrying about their biodegradable beakers being delivered for the art opening later in the night. And I couldn't help feel it was all a bit mad, because while my engine's ticking over, there's all this stuff, gases being gulped out. And I was just getting more and more pissed off, mad about the fact that, again, I saw a TV programme about this, that the nitrogen oxide, it goes up into the atmosphere out of car emissions and creates acid rain. And this acid rain falls on the oceans and is killing the oceans. So it's like, again, sort of, it's not adding up when there's like people moaning about waste this, waste that and the other on one side of it. People writing about biogas. I don't know why they couldn't just wash the bloody glasses they used for years out in the first place. There just seems to be some sort of disconnect going on. And it's all you can do is sort of get angry. Because surely, if, you know, as an artist or a van driver or a protester, young protester on the streets, we've all got a lot in common. And the main thing is about, you know, now, like I say, it's 2030, people are dying of starvation. You know, that we're not, you know, the food system just seems to be in a right state, you know, a mess. It has been for, I don't know, 15 years, I don't know. But it's all these things that we, I don't know, it just don't seem add up. And all I can seem to do is to get on with my job and get angrier and angrier. And I sort of think about feeding my kids. I always have. Just thought about putting food on the table. And I look to farmers and to help me out, but, you know, to put the food. But I sort of think, you know, is that my job? Is it, you know, can I really expect farmers to produce the food to feed the planet on their own. It's, can I expect farmers to sort out this wretch over here? It's bad enough. But anyway, it seems to me like it is a bit of I'm getting madder and madder, and you know, here I am sort of contemplating gas emissions, and people are getting hungrier and hungrier, dying, and I'm here with a pitchfork in my hand. It's like Frankenstein, but I'm not pursuing him on the scientist. The scientist is in his castle, but I'm not pursuing that. You know, I'm expecting to be fed. You know, we've been expecting to be fed for 50, 60 years, and it keeps coming. Them kids, the kids that are protesting against waste, they, you know, when they watch Delia, or, well, when I was a kid anyway, say they're watching Jamie Oliver's Left programme, if they need a certain ingredient, they expect the supermarkets to have it on the shelf when they go to buy it. So, you know, to make that happen, the supermarkets have to hoard food so they can put it on the shelf. If Jamie Oliver says you need that in your recipe, then you need it in your recipe. So that's that. But it just makes me sort of angry, because that is inbuilt waste, and that seems to be our whole political system. The entire way of life that we've existed in for years. It's about somebody's got a lock and key with a store of consumables, you know, food, nutrients, whatever, energy, you name it, and we expect them to bring it to us. So what is it? What is it? It's like that waste has to be there. It just, we can't live without waste, as we understand it. It's poor people, my mates, we don't waste anything. We don't waste anything. We don't waste food. You know, we just, whether it's, you know, we get to the supermarket with what you've earned over there, a few pennies, you've not got much spare change, but you get to the freezer section, you buy enough fish fingers to last you and the kids like 5 weeks something, and it goes in the freezer. I can't even get so much in the freezer. I can't afford a big chest freezer in the conservatory. You know, it's like, I get what I can, put it in things, and it gets out. Usually by the kids, and I end up going hungry myself, but it's the same with energy. You know, energy that we rely on to run our computers or whatever, or energy, just physical energy. We don't waste anything. It's a certain section of society's problem, but I do think it's getting away from the real problems that we're all subject to at the moment. And again, it's and you sort of get to a point where you're tearing your hair out, and you're thinking, what have you got to do to sort of make it? Do you have to, do you join the marches with the kids? You know, block off Mayfair, peacefully professed. The guys at the private view couldn't give a monkeys. They've got loads of money. But it's like, I need to get my pitchfork out. Do I actually need to start thinking about just round the corner, there's like Buckingham Palace, Houses of Parliament. You've got all these people who own huge swathes of land, farmland, and we're seriously just asking them to just repurpose it or that and, you know, titivating here and there. Well, there's a population explosion going on. It's like, again, I saw, it was on the telly. I saw a thing, you know, it said that back in the day, all these lords and ladies and everything, they nicked this land off us in the first place, hundreds of years ago. So my answer to that is simple. We just take it back. And then, yeah, we all work together with the scientists and whatever, and we create this system, you know, inner city farms, outer city farms, farms on other planets, if you like. But we just need to do this sort of thing. But my mate Chris on Facebook, he says this is all rubbish. It's all loud bollocks. It's all made up. It's all made up. All these, you know, climate change.
That's enough. Come on, don't be ridiculous. Your mate Chris on Facebook over the last 10 minutes of surfing the internet against how many careers in academia over the last few decades? Yeah. That is absolutely ridiculous. I'm sorry. You got to stop.
Yeah, I think, yes, Chris. It's, that about sums it up, actually. Yeah, you shut up and stay in your little bubble. And then I think, yeah, myself and my scientist friend here is... Anyway, as I was saying, maybe, yeah, we've got to think differently. Pitchfork or what? Yeah. Do we form mobs to be mobs? What you know? What's that all about? Surely we're better than that. Surely we can search and find something better than that. Yeah, so we can walk tall with, you know, full bellies. Look at that. Look at that. It's like, I've been lucky. I've had a job. You know, I have got weird tummy problems, but yeah, we need to work together. So I think I should put down that weapon, and this other weapon over here, I think we should, yeah, get mad together, and let's, yeah, this gas problem that we've got over here, let's, I saw one of them earlier. So it was left on a step. I was wondering what happened to that. So I was thinking, this is rather an amazing thing, and it belongs to you. Wow, so yeah. It's, let me help you into this shoe. It's, so, there we go. So, let me hold you up there. So, maybe together we can do this thing. So, Christ, I don't know how on earth you managed to stand up in them heels. I really don't. It's crazy.
Well, I'm not quite sure what to say other than wow. I'm blown away, and I've got lots of questions running through my mind. And Professor Tim Daniel has very kindly agreed to join us after he's gulped some water and drawn his breath a little bit. So can I just remind you, if you do have any questions that you're burning to ask Tim, then please do put them in the live chat. or you can tweet them to us using the hashtag #Planet2Plate, and we'll pick them up on Twitter. So, as the caption says, don't be shy. We really welcome questions from the audience, but we've already had a few in, and this is a question I think lots of us probably had. Grub is angry. Who should his anger be directed towards? The government, business, the media? What do you reckon, Tim?
Yeah, that's a difficult one, right? So I think one of the reasons that you can get angry about this is that there's no real person or anyone to get angry at. It's an entire societal problem. I mean, when the Green Revolution happened, we had no idea that this was going to happen, that we are not going to release a lot of nitrous oxide into the atmosphere from it, or even what that nitrous oxide would do, I guess, in the middle of the last century. So I think it's worth getting angry, but I don't think there is anyone to get angry at. And as we all know, that's probably the most frustrating thing. I think what we need to do is turn this around and try and work out different ways that we can actually cut down on these emissions and actually work together, both scientists, governments, everyone, to actually try and reduce the emissions and the waste that we have.
I think you're right. The Green Revolution is increasingly becoming a phrase of disdain, and I think we forget that Norman Borlaug, the father of the Green Revolution, was a humanitarian, and when he spoke of creating the Green Revolution, it was about people's right to affordable food and healthy food, and he considered himself a humanitarian, and his mission was a humanitarian one. So I think it's very easy to look at the events of the Green Revolution through the lens of history, without recognizing why that technology was necessary. And I guess this question really feeds into that next point. We've created solutions that got us to a population, the population we currently have. How are we going to feed 10 billion people sustainably? So what would you like to say to Grub, Tim, and I guess me as well as a scientist, about the possible solutions for feeding the world?
Well, I think if we deal with the obvious ones first, I mean, just in general, I think if we cut down on food waste, somewhere around 30% of food produced never reaches a table. So, I mean, I think that's probably one of the simplest solutions that we can, and that happens all the way through the process, from the field all the way through the shops, through to food left in a refrigerator too long. But there are other ways that we can try and cut down on the impacts of agriculture, and we can use the plant itself, and this is some of the work that we and others have been doing over the last sort of 10 or 20 years, trying to understand how the plant can manipulate the soil community we were talking about earlier on to actually cut down on those emissions in the first place, and so reduce the detrimental impacts and get rid of some more of these balloons without any cost to agriculture itself.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think for me, everything has to be on the table. I think we have considered technologies niche that now are proving themselves to be technologies that will be mainstream. And I think about hydroponics, for example. When you and I were growing up in the 70s and 80s, our food wasn't produced hydroponically, it was all produced in soil. Yet now, pretty much every tomato that you're going to eat has been produced hydroponically. Most of your strawberries in the summer will have been produced hydroponically. So I think, I think we had some barriers to adopting those technologies because we considered them niche. And I think the next technology for me is urban agriculture, is urban food production. It's collapsing supply chains, growing food where people live, so they're eating food that is very close to where they consume it. And I think that's one of the ways that we solve your first point, which I totally agree with, which is reducing food waste. If we collapse supply chains, means if we grow food locally so people can eat it within a day of it being picked, we suddenly dramatically prolong the shelf life of our food, and we start to target food waste. But there are other issues in terms of decisions that we make about consumption that are, I think, really important. And again, you know, we've spoken about it in almost every event of this festival. The reason for having this festival is to showcase the power of interdisciplinary thinking, and here we have an example of natural science, the arts, but also social science being critical to understanding consumption patterns, and working with stakeholders to understand how we can help shift some of those consumption patterns.
Yeah, I think we can take couple of steps back there. I think that the good thing about the hydroponic, I mean, you're never going to grow wheat, rice or maize, for potatoes hydroponically, but of course there's less waste probably in those systems, so that cuts it down. I think that you know, even work like this, pure natural science work, you would argue perhaps needs social science to actually make it work. So you know, we can come up with all the solutions that we can in the lab, we can test them. But until you can make an economic argument to either the government or to the farmer or to agronomist or to whoever else, the producer, then how are they going to get taken up? So I think that almost every aspect of the work in food systems does require that interdisciplinary sort of input person.
I absolutely agree. And, you know, following on from that vein, and this is very much a question for you because this is your research, but what was the starting point for the research behind this piece? And I guess from an academic perspective, but also the underlying research that you and Anthony did together with Giselle to build the piece.
Yeah, so the research that came behind this, where we're looking at the different nitrogen cycling processes. There's one called nitrification, which is the conversion of ammonia to nitrate. Now that's potentially an issue because nitrate can be leached, but it's also available for conversion to N2O, and that process releases N2O itself, nitrous oxide itself. And the other is denitrification, and that's the use of nitrate by the microorganisms, which can release either nitrogen, not a problem, or nitrous oxide. So because we have started to understand, maybe a couple of decades ago, that just how much the plant manipulates that soil community, and the most active part of the soil is around that plant because it feeds those communities with carbon, that we started thinking about how that interacts with the nitrogen cycle. And what we have seen is that within the plant lines that we grow in the fields now, there are some lines which have far lower nitrogen cycling capacity or activity than others. So what we think is that we can actually use this both to select lines currently, which would be more climate smart, if you like, but also to provide breeding targets going into the future to try and remove some of this nitrous oxide emission or nitrate leaching from the system in the first place. And you know, we've been doing that for a couple of decades, and we've got to the point now where we're working with companies actually trying to look at how realistic this is as a breeding target.
And I guess that feeds into the next really nice question, which is one to both of us, which is Grub asks a lot of questions, but he didn't seem to have many answers. Can science provide answers, or are we just asking more and different questions?
I think one of the things with science is it's a bit like an onion. You answer a question and another question pops up. And I think I think the nitrous oxide emission is a true wicked problem that you know, as we talked about in the piece, that we can only deal with about 10% of the emissions that we're currently emitting, but we don't know about other solutions. So things like plant breeding, changing the ways that we grow plants, maybe changing fertilizer formulations, all sorts. Using organic fertilizers could cut down. We've done some work in China that shows that can reduce nitrous oxide emissions significantly. So I think there are solutions coming along, but I think for me, it's just a matter of just chipping away at the block and trying to make it better and better. But the ultimate problem is, to grow the food we need to use fertilizer. And if you use fertilizer, you're going to release greenhouse gas. So there is no option. We can make it as good as we can, but compared to, for example, only driving electric cars, there's no simple solution as there is in many industrial or societal issues. So it is a truly wicked problem.
I think it's a classic example of how low can you go, and then using tools like carbon offsetting to offset the relative greenhouse gas or greenhouse warming, potential global warming effect of the nitrous oxides. And for me, I think your analogy of chipping away at the block is the right one, because we often hear about silver bullets in agriculture, that genetic modification was going to end hunger within a generation, and of course it hasn't, and it hasn't for very legitimate reasons. But that's not to say science can't provide answers. And I've been fortunate, I guess, as you have, to have straddled that pure science, applied science space for decades now, and to see the technologies that we've created being used by farmers in fields that are reducing the impact of the food that they produce, democratizing food production. But again, I think a lot of the answers aren't big agri-tech. The kind of equivalent of big pharma in food. I think a lot of those solutions will become local. And I think one of the issues is that we still haven't got to grips with the embedded knowledge within the communities that produce our food, who actually, when you spend the time to understand why they do things and why their practices are as they are, encoded within that multiple generations of knowledge are gems that suddenly do prove transformational.
I think it's far too easy to forget. I mean, I think that people like us have gone straight through an educational system. You're completely focused on science all of the time, and actually the most important thing we can probably do, and it's really brilliant when you get a chance to do this, is to just chat to producers, because as you say, they know a huge amount about the agricultural system, more than I'm ever going to know. And it's absolutely essential that we maintain that sort of linkage between all of the groups that are involved in the process.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that process of co-design of questions is how we get tangible answers that will be useful. And co-design requires different stakeholders being able to talk to one another on an equal footing. And for me, that's the point of doing this. It's to catalyse those conversations, and to be a bit playful as scientists. So the next question that really jumps out is in that vein, which is, what if the role or the power of art science encounters like Bittersweet Air to make the public think differently about these issues?
I think it's about explanation, and I hope that people that have watched this go away knowing a little bit more about what the problem is, and understanding a little bit more about maybe what some of the solutions could be. And how simple some of those may be. Reducing waste, that's not so difficult, and everyone can get involved in that. And I think until we've got an educated society, it's very difficult to make the right choices. I mean, if you don't know what the issues are, how can you possibly make that choice? And to be honest, it's educated me as well. Like working with Anthony and with others in projects like this really makes me think about the subject in a different way, and that helps me as well. This isn't all one way. It's I think there's a lot of gain to be gathered from everyone involved in these projects, whether you're watching it, producing it, or providing information for it.
Absolutely, and as we kind of discussed in Ryan's performance yesterday, which you can watch if you would like to, just plugging our events that are now stacking up on our website. We talked about the emotional nature of what we consume, and food is more than something that sustains us. We have a deep connection to food and different types of food, whether that's emotional and whether that is cultural. And again, I think that for me is the power of sci-art as well, is that you break down those social cultural barriers around food. it is playful, and it has made everyone smile watching you all run around in a sea of balloons. But quite seriously, there is a serious point to this, and I think balancing that mixture of raising awareness and information with exploring how people feel about that is something that you've really achieved here.
I'm going to get in trouble for this, but my eldest daughter, when she was 14, we were talking about my work, and she stopped me and she said, Dad, stop. And I said, well, this is important. She just turned around and said, Dad, I'm not saying it's not important. I'm telling you it's boring. And I think what we need to do is move away from that to a point where actually it's easier for people to engage with the work that's being done. And if this sort of event helps do that, then absolutely fantastic. Right? So I will take my punishment later today.
Next time she comes to visit you, you're in trouble. And this is a question for you. I've talked about my experiences as well, and I guess that was one of the reasons for me asking the questions. But how you talked a bit about feeling different and reevaluating your work in the context of your experience of working with artists. So how does it make you feel? Think differently? Could you maybe explore that a little bit more?
I can give you a really good example. I think, and it's in front of us. I've worked in nitrogen cycling for 2 or 3 decades, however long it's been, and I've never had the visual image of just how much of this gas is given off. It's just a sort of abstract number. So this amount of balloons really is the amount of gas that a field of that size would give off. And I find that terrifying and really illuminating. And in some ways, it's really sort of re-galvanized my interest in trying to sort this out. And I think it's that sort of having to think and come up with ways to represent the information and provide Anthony with the information he needed to come up with the idea in a sort of reasonably accurate way. I think it's like teaching, isn't it? I think it's just absolutely makes you understand your subject a lot better. And I think you get lazy as you get older and you become more used to it, and you think only about the detail and forget the big picture. And I think the big picture is really important.
And there's nothing like being pushed out of your comfort zone to look at the big picture.
Yeah, that's that.
Well, that's absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for providing that window onto the process and the underlying science. So that's all we have in terms of questions, I think, and we're just bang on time. So that's absolutely perfect. So that's the end of today. Thank you so much, Anthony and Giselle, for the amazing performance and artwork. And please do join us later on today, where you'll have the opportunity to hear Professor Tony Ryan, OBE, and Dr. Moed Al-Naslimani in conversation about the wonderful Desert Garden project, where they have used old mattresses to produce food in the desert with refugees from the crisis in Syria. It's a really amazing story. So thank you very much.